Hello, everyone. What we're going to do is we're going to turn this installation of server into a domain controller. Now, there's a few things that you have to have active before you turn a server into a domain controller. You need to make sure that the server has a static IP address, and it's usually a good idea to make sure the server has the has the host name that you want it to have. So we're going to log into this machine. We're going to check both the host name and the IP address, and then we'll proceed from there. So now I'm going to wait until my server manager completes loading, and I'm going to look for the name of my server. I'll click under local server. You see here, my server does have a server name. If you just install server by itself, it will create an extremely unique and extremely long host name. So one of the things I would always suggest is that before you start doing major work on any installation on a server, always check the host name. Now I'm going to use the command line to check for the IP address. So to do that, go to the search option, sometimes called the run option actually, and CMD. And I'm going to move a little bit of this stuff out of the way. If you looked at any of the earlier videos, you should know what commands do those things. And now I'm going to display the command that shows me the IP address information. So I see it has the IP address that I want it to have. It isn't using DHCP. And when you just use ipconfig by itself, that is the basic way to run that command. There's more advanced ways, but for right now, the only thing we really need to see is the fact that a static IP address is on this machine. All right, let's go ahead and turn this machine into a domain controller. To start the process of creating a domain controller, you would go into Server Manager in the dashboard. This is where you get to do really cool stuff to this server. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding roles and features. It basically gives you a instruction sheet / warning saying that you're making major changes to this machine. We'll go ahead and hit next. You can either make this a virtual machine for a system or a real machine. We're going to pretend it's a real machine, and we'll hit next. There you go. It gives us a host name that it saw, and it also gives us the IP address. If we didn't have a static IP address, it would give us a couple of warnings. Now hit next. These are some of the cool features you'll get to add to server. For this installation, we only need two features. Once you click on some of the features, it's going to automatically add other features. Traditionally, if you click on a feature and it makes a suggestion that you need other things, you should go ahead and accept those other things. So when you are installing a domain controller, there's two primary features you're going to need. You're going to need Active Directory domain services, and you're also going to need DNS server services. If you do not install both of those services, the installation will fail. If you don't install both of those services, the installation will fail. So I'm going to check each of those services. And once I check the service, it's going to make recommendations that I also have the other services. So I'm going to check Active Directory domain services, and you notice it gave me some recommendations on some other things I should have. I'm going to hit add features. I'm going to check on DNS server. You notice it gave me some more recommendations. I'm going to hit add features. Then I'm going to hit next. For the remainder of these puppies, it's primarily next until it gets to this part of a reload where we get to add some more features. So here we go. Next. 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 And install. Now, what it's starting to do is it's checking this installation of the operating system to see if it has the best things you could have selected to make this machine a domain controller. Now, after that, it's going to give you one of 3 different options for everything you selected. Either it's good to go, it might be okay, and you're missing something. Now, since we're doing a basic installation of server, it's going to give us a whole bunch of cautions. But at the end, it's going to say, well, hey, as long as you like it this way, you can go ahead and install the software. So you notice now, it said it installed the basic features. It's still up to you to continue on. Now I'm going to hit the close button, but notice there's an asterisk at the top. That means that there's still more work that you have to do. I just click on that, and then you click on promote this server to a domain controller. Every once in a while, you will see a blue line moving from left to right. Even if these fields are available, don't bother clicking on them until that strobing blue light disappears. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new forest. We can call the domain anything you want. I'm going to make mine cool.com. And then I'm going to hit next. Notice that blue line strobing at the top? Again, it's thinking about the response you put in, and then it's also creating the next question it's going to ask you. Until that gray-blue scrolling bar disappears, don't bother to click on anything, even if it looks like you can. Normally, when there's time in the installation, I pause my video, but just to give you the real feeling of how long it's going to take, I'm not going to pause any portion of this video unless I absolutely have to. You notice it has words and fields, but that blue-gray line is still scrolling. As long as that line is scrolling, don't bother to click on anything. All right, so now there's always a possibility in the future that your server will crash and you can't use a GUI to fix it. Well, what you can do is you can use command line to fix it. You can have the same exact password as your normal installation, or you can type in a totally different password. I'm going to use the same password. Now, in addition to that, you may be introducing this server into older networks. Well, you can actually select different types of or different versions of Windows Server. And essentially, you're dumbing it down so it can talk to an older server. This is usually done so possibly you can get this server on the network and you can replace the older server, and then you can bring this up to the standards. But since there's no other servers on our network, we're going to keep everything to server 2016. And I'm going to hit the next button. Here's some questions it's going to start asking you. It needs to see if there is a DNS server that exists anywhere for this machine to talk to. Now, just for the heck of it, we're going to look in our DNS server settings. Now, for our experiment, I'm using the same exact settings for the DNS server as I'm using for the IP address of the domain controller. In the event that this is the first domain controller in your network, this is really how it's supposed to be. Once we finish the installation of Active Directory on this machine, it's going to change this IP address. It's going to change it to 127.0.0.1. That's a loop back address. It means look at itself. It puts it in there just in case you forgot to put in an IP address in this section. Once we finish the Active Directory installation, you're going to see 127.0.0.1 here. After that's done, I'm going to change it back to 10.10 because no, we did not forget to put it in. So we'll just hit next. Now it's seeing if it can create a name that really old computers or computers that don't use DNS or Active Directory would use to find this machine. We're talking about old installations like Windows 95, Windows 98, DOS, things along those lines. It doesn't use .coms and .edus. It just used the first name. So even though we don't have any systems that are going to be on our network operating this way, we're still going to keep that name in there and hit next. In a real installation, you have a whole bunch of log files. The files that log files are lists of actions that have occurred on the machine that can be reviewed later in case there's a problem. The database folder is really how Active Directory keeps track of what users are where, different things that are installed on the server. And then you have the sysball folder. This is the folder that allows all of the commands and configurations that you set up on this domain controller to automatically be copied on other domain controllers. Depending on the size of your hard drives, sometimes they put these three folders on different servers, or they'll back them up someplace else for safety. We're just doing it all in one place. So we'll hit next. It gives us a readout of everything that we asked for. This is your last ditch effort to be sure that you put in what you wanted. Then we go ahead and hit next. Now you notice there's an exclamation point in a yellow triangle shield down here. So again, what it's going to do is it's going to take a look at all of the settings that we put in there. and it's going to make its recommendations based on Microsoft best practices, the things we did well, the things that might be cautionary, and the things that are totally missing and or messed up. Depending on those readouts, it will either say that the installation cannot continue, or it will say you can continue the installation, and there'll be a green dot there. Now you notice it gave us a whole bunch of exclamation points. Again, we're not really trying to create the best server in the world. This is just for class. But see, at the end of the day, at the top, you see that there's a green check mark there saying, you know what, you can still install it this way if you wanted to. In addition to that, if you missed looking at that green check mark, there's also one at the bottom of the script where it says, even though this isn't the most secure server in the world, you got everything that you need. You can go ahead and continue the installation if you'd like to. So, hey, we're going to continue the installation. We're going to hit install. Now, when you're doing this real life, as a technician, you would never sit here and watch this. As you see, it starts thinking, gathering files, and that blue bar starts scrolling. Traditionally, what we do at this time is we'll be looking at a manual, looking at our specification forms. We might even be looking at a totally different computer at that time, fixing it, because this goes on and on for quite some time. Again, what I would normally do is I would pause my recording and let it start again where we left off at. But just to give you a better idea of how long the installation can take, I'm actually going to let this entire video capture the installation. Notice what it's doing. It's starting to install stuff. And it actually gives you a readout of what it's doing at that moment. And then bingo, bango, boppo, when it's done doing its installation stuff, it automatically triggers for a restart. You could either hit close, or you could just let it restart on its own. Traditionally, I let it restart on its own because you never know with Microsoft. Sometimes clicking that button at the wrong time sets back all of your work. So you see it done its own restart. Afterwards, the way we log in is going to look a little bit different. Hey, yep, and I'm still here watching this with you. But again, in real life, normally a technician would have walked away and came back after about 10 or 15 minutes. And you also have to remember, you have to keep in mind that usually technicians get paid by the hour. So just the fact that something is taking a little longer is not necessarily a bad thing. Well, another thing to consider while we're watching this scrolling circly thing, another thing to consider is if you have more RAM on your server, it doesn't take quite this long. Now, remember, we're doing all of this on a virtual machine, so it's actually sharing its memory with other machines on the network. So again, the fact that this is taking a little bit of time, it's okay. Don't worry, your machine is not giving you any problems. Okay, yep, I am going to pause the recording because this is like torture for you guys. So I'll turn the recording back on after the installation is done. Bingo, bango, boppo. So now you notice again, we do have a installation of server. Now, a lot of individuals often panic when they see this screen because it looks exactly like Windows 8, Windows 10. Well, this is just the GUI that was created. Windows, our server, 2008 cleared through like server 2016. I even think server 2019 is actually based on the same GUI. All they did was put a different paint job. Microsoft put a different paint job on a cop car and a more powerful engine, but it uses a lot of the same features. So even though you see this window, we're still using Server 2000, and I think this is this 12, either 12 or 16 in this class. So let's go ahead and log in. You notice all of a sudden now it puts a name and a slash in front of the user that's about to log in. That first name is the domain name. And then the second name after the slash is the specific user who's logging in. Now, if you're logging in as this is a user from the domain, all you have to do is put in the password. If you're logging in as a different user, you'd actually have to put in cool and all that kind of stuff. But don't worry about that for right now, because traditionally, regular users don't log into the domain controller. And again, this desktop looks like Windows 8, Windows 10. Understand you are still using a server. So now what Server Manager is going to do is this going to find out about all the new cool stuff that you added. So for example, remember at the top, it used to just say local server, but now it has all these other features. Literally, server manager on that specific machine can look at a whole bunch of different servers and control all those servers if they're in the same domain. It also shows you that Active Directory domain services has been installed on the server. It also shows you DNS has been installed on the server. And it also gives you the ability to share files across the network. So these are some of the new features that have been installed. Now, a lot of people click on these items to try to control those features. The features really cannot be controlled to their full extent with these options. This is just showing you what exists. When you want to start controlling features, you have a couple of different options that you can utilize. The quickest option that you can utilize is by using the Tools menu. When I click on the Tools menu, a whole bunch of options are going to pop down, and let us see. Now, those options will include Active Directory, DNS, and a whole score of other features. Let's check it out. So I hit Tools. These are all the cool things that are still in this server, as well as other things that you added. So let's go ahead and check on the control features of Active Directory. Like here, you see about the top 5 important things that everybody starts talking about. So when we look at exactly how Active Directory operates and its real controls, that's when you want to hit on this button. So let's go ahead and check on Active Directory users and computers. You'll see the name of our domain. You see some pre-configured options for us, like the domain controllers that are part of our network. You notice it says SV1. Now, you'll also notice it's not in computers. If a computer is a domain controller, it's a computer all by itself. Just kind of think of it as this person's in the VIP of the club. If we had any regular computers or workstations, they would appear in computers. When you create users on this machine, they're going to be inside of the users OU. And you see by default, it already has certain users, like the user that I'm logged in as right now. That's the administrator. If you create any new users, automatically they're going to appear here. Now, later on, I'm going to be showing you some small stuff you could do to keep better track of your users. But essentially, any users you create will automatically appear in the users folder. Let's look at that DNS stuff. Domain name system. We see the name of our server. When we click on it, you see these snap-ins that appear. When I hit the list arrow in front of that snap-in and click on any specific snap-in, it shows me some more stuff about the domain. I could expand it in this left panel, and it shows you all of the computer systems that are presently, my fault, not computer systems. It shows you all the systems that are presently part of cool.com, and you see it puts its fully qualified domain name in here. Fully qualified name is the host name before the domain name. Now we're going to check on one more thing. Remember in the beginning, I told you, when you upgrade a server installation into a domain controller, it will change the DNS settings on the network interface on that card. We're going to go ahead and check to see if it changed it to the loop back address of 127.0.0.1. So I'll right click, open Network and Sharing Center. Oh, and just for conversational purposes, you notice there's an exclamation point down there on the network interface. It's probably so small you can't see it, but once you start doing these experiments, you're going to see it down there. All that means is this device cannot find the internet. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your network interface connection. It simply means that it can't find the rest of the world, which is okay because these systems are not set up right now to go to the rest of the world. So if you see that when you're doing your experiments, it's no problem. If you ever see that on a real computer that you're using to get on the internet, you're going to have some challenges you're going to have to deal with. So let's check the network interface's DNS settings. Look at there, look at there. You notice it put that 127.0.0.1 in there, and it's just in case you as an installer forgot that that IP address should be the same exact IP address as your domain controller. What I do is after I complete the installation, I put the correct IP address in there by hand. And then I also check by using the command line. Let's just get a host name first. See if SB81 is still there. And we see the IP address that we wanted is there. So that is the process of creating a domain controller. Hope you guys got something out of this. And as needed, go ahead and run this video back a couple of times because you never know if there's something that you missed.